Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are. Thank you for joining us for our webinar today, Why Digital Transformations Are Failing at Scale, Avoid It by Shifting from Project to Product. My name is Laurel Heenan, and I am delighted to be your moderator for this webinar. Before I introduce you to our presenters, please let me cover a couple housekeeping details. This webinar is being recorded, and we will provide you all with a link to the recording in the next day or so. As you may have noticed, all attendees are on mute to avoid background noise, but that doesn't mean we don't want to hear from you. We will leave plenty of time at the end for questions and answers, but if you have any questions and comments as we go, please type them in the GoToWebinar control panel in the questions box. Our presenters today are Tasktop CEO, Dr. Mik Kersten, and guest speaker, Forrester Vice President and Principal Analyst, Diego Lo Giudice. With Forrester since July 2005, Diego primarily contributes to and advises on Forrester's offerings for application development and delivery professionals. He partners with Forrester's global application leaders and is a leading expert on SDLC processes and practices, covering topics such as Agile development, Agile and lean transformations, Agile development sourcing strategies and services, Agile testing practices and tools, DevOps, and software testing and quality, with a key focus on systems of engagement. Diego also covers software delivery metrics, artificial intelligence, and open source governance. Dr. Mik Kersten started his career as a research scientist at Xerox PARC, where he created the first aspect-oriented development environment. He then pioneered the integration of development tools with Agile and DevOps as a part of his computer science PhD at University of British Columbia. Founding Tasktop out of that research, Mik has written over 1 million lines of open source code that are still in use today and has brought 7 successful open source and commercial products to market. Mik's experiences working with some of the largest digital transformations in the world has led him to identify the critical disconnect between business leaders and technologists. Since then, as CEO of Tasktop, Mik has been working on creating new tools and a new framework for connecting software value stream networks and enabling the shift from project to product. And with that, I will pass the webinar on to Diego to begin. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon and good morning and good night to everyone, or good evening. For those of you that are around the globe, usually we have people from Asia Pac, United States, and Europe on these calls. So today it's actually going to be an interesting presentation. We are experimenting with Mik this joint discussion through slides, and I think it's going to be nice and interactive. But basically, you know, what we're going to be discussing a lot about is how digital transformations, which is one of the hot topics, still one of the hottest topics, I would say, in the industry. How's that going? And actually, you'll see, you know, what we think in terms of you'll see some adoption trends and the status of digital transformation, and how that, of course, what the status of it is, and what are some of the challenges, and what are some of the new trends and new approaches that we think are developing on the market from a Forrester perspective. But of course, Mik has also his Tasktop hat on, and will share his thinking as well. So let me start from the very, you know, from the very beginning of what we want to talk about. And we, you know, digital transformation and digital acceleration are hot agenda topics, as I said. You can see that in the last 2 years, they're both improving customer experience and accelerating digital transformations have rose to the top of most primary focus process improvement efforts in organizations, right? And I think this is 2 years from now, but we know in Forrester that digital transformation, digital acceleration is something very long term, and it's going to continue to grow and happen over the years. However, what we're also seeing is that most digital transformation initiatives are actually not cutting it. They're not making it. They're failing. We even hear of some of the, you know, those cool digital groups, shiny digital groups that are at the last floor of your building sometimes, that are working in an isolated way, are being shut down. And the reason is because, you know, well, we'll see what the reasons are and the challenges are in a minute. But basically, out of these numbers, you can see that there's a pretty high number of them that are currently underway in transforming to digital. And what that means is some of them are patching digital in front of their existing systems. Some of them are investigating what to do with digital transformation. And the really interesting number here is the 21%. Actually, you know, I usually see people smiling when they look at that number, because 21% think, and I think are confused, that their digital transformation is completed. And we all know that digital transformation is a state of being. It's something that never ends, because business and markets are changing all the time, technologies are changing. So you know when you start a digital transformation, but you don't know when you're done or when you're finished. And so what is it that is going on? Well, let me give you an example of some of the you know, poor outcomes of digital transformation. Basically, we all talk about customer experience, and customer experience is based on also how the customer journey of your clients, of your partners, of your end users, what the entire experience of the journey is, right? As they go through the products, the services, as they engage through the different steps of looking for something, buying something, having support for what they bought. And there's hundreds of backend systems that we call the core that is supporting that customer experience. You can see that here, right? It's under the C, if you will, level, and it's in red because it's a big part of what runs, you know, a big part of what your that runs your business operations. We're talking about, you know, backend systems like supply chain, vendor management, logistics, B2B, and even CRM. But then these also have, of course, what customers see and what customers touch all the time. Maybe the mobile application, for example, is a manifestation of that system on the front. And the problem is that while we've created shiny, cool customer experiences at the visual level with mobile apps, with maybe new web front-end applications, we haven't really modernized the backend. And so what happens quite often is that this creates what we call a digital illusion, because customer journeys break. I'm going to give you an example of some broken customer journeys, for example. So Tesla and many actually automotive companies have created great, cool mobile apps that you can do a lot of stuff to your car with it. I don't have a Tesla. I have a Mercedes, and I can configure my car. I can do things with my car. But with Tesla, you can do even more, right? Very, very advanced technology in Tesla. But this is the car of a friend of mine, another analyst. It's Rob Kopselwitz. And what happened to him is, it looks like in the Bay Area, you know, they're breaking into cars quite often. They break the glasses, and what he experienced was that he couldn't really get his window glass replaced. The only way he could get the attention of Tesla, after calling insurances, calling the repair shops, he was tweeting this exactly this image here directly to Elon Musk. And after day number 5, this is day 3, 5 or 6, somebody called in from Tesla and said, "Can you please stop tweeting Elon Musk, you know, with this image?" And Rob responded, "Can you please stop keeping my car in the garage? I want to use the car," right? And so basically the point is really that the managed replacement glass inventory system of Tesla somewhat is broken, is not working, and that's not contributing to the overall great customer experience of Rob, right? Great car again, great mobile app, but something in the back end is not working. This is actually my own experience, and it's you know, I was buying a train ticket, a fast train ticket here in Italy, and I have the 2 authentication payment. I was buying the ticket on a web on my desktop, and the payment was being approved through my mobile app, but nothing was happening. Basically, I had to go through the payment a couple of times. The payment failed. I had to redo the whole booking of the ticket and everything. Bad customer journey. And by the way, this is a very nice overall mobile application that my bank provides me with, but again, my overall customer experience wasn't good enough. And Mik, I think you have something to say about
Yes.
stock.
Yeah, exactly. So this is, I think that's a couple of great stories, Diego, and I just want to share a couple of mine as well. And I think this metaphor that you showed us of this digital illusion, it's fascinating when you actually look at this chart and you think about how differently the company on the left, Amazon, has invested in its core compared to the companies on the right. And what I've noticed over and over from talking to the other organizations I've been talking to and their shift from project to product is how much focus there is on kind of the front end, the screens, that nice mobile interface that you just showed us, within enterprises trying to make the shift to become innovators in software delivery, who are really putting a lot of emphasis on, starting to put a lot of emphasis on the digital, on the customer-facing products. If you look at some of these retailers, for example, Amazon stands out because when you consider the amount of core investment that this company has done, right? They've actually created an entire other company effectively out of it with AWS by replatforming and focusing so much on their core. It's just been an absolutely stark difference to me as I speak to leadership in different organizations. The product mindset is only starting to surface in terms of how these organizations are looking at the digital experiences, but it truly is this realm of digital illusion right now. And so what I'm realizing, and as we go through this, they need to focus on the core. They need to understand your backend systems. They need to understand why, for a car manufacturer, the most important product, it's not the car, it's the plant, right? The fact that when we look at the way that these companies like the Amazons and the Googles and the Microsofts, the way they invest in their backend systems, the way they actually invest in their value stream network, some of them have thousands of developers working on just their internal tool chains to keep them productive. Some of the tech giants put their best developers on their tool chains, and then their next best developers on their core systems. And then the other developers actually go onto the customer-facing products, because of course that's how they get the most productivity, that's how they get the most improvement. Whereas with so many of the organizations that I meet with and I speak to, it's actually reversed. The best developers are going to customer-facing products. Those customer-facing products those digital experiences don't deliver on their promise because the core is not there. And so one of the key things that I think I've been seeing, especially over the course of the year, is this need to invest in your core, to invest in your backend, and to treat that as a first-class product, to treat your platforms as products, to avoid this digital illusion. And I just want to relate this, Diego, to one of the earlier slides that you showed, right? Is what's driving these digital transformations. And when we start a digital transformation, when an organization starts a digital transformation from a cost reduction mindset, it's actually without a notion of ongoing value delivery, of innovating for the customer, of keeping the customer in the loop. You can never get to this place where you understand how much you need to invest in your core. So I was speaking with a bank not too long ago whose chief digital officer had invested tremendously in different new digital experiences. But the architecture behind those digital experiences could never support those new screens, those mobile applications in any kind of robust way. A little bit of the story that you experienced, Diego. Some of the people I spoke with said it's as if we had invented and created and designed a beautiful dashboard and the most modern dashboard for a new kind of car, but we didn't have an engine. We didn't actually have the car. We could not deploy it. So this is in such stark contrast to the innovators that we see, the tech giants who actually invest so much in their core, so much in their platforms, and really extend product thinking out of this cost center mentality in terms of, okay, we've reduced cost, we're done with the digital transformation. Into how do we improve in an ongoing way for serving our customers better, for becoming more competitive? And the point of the slide is companies that don't do that, that don't actually take that product thinking beyond just the customer-facing experiences and actually start investing in their core, understand a value metric, not just a core metric, have a feedback loop with their customers in terms of what's working, what's not, they'll actually never get to that place in the journey where they realize how important their core products, their internal products, their platforms, and their APIs are. And I actually see that that lack of product thinking, or that at least that shallow product thinking, which is actually resulting in a whole bunch of these retailers here being ripe for disruption because they realize they need to go digital. They just don't know how in the level that Amazon has.
Yeah. So I guess, Mik already alluded to some of the to what's going on and what are some of the problems, but let's take a little bit of a closer look. Well, I recently we had our digital forum both in Chicago and in London, and my keynote presentation was exactly titled this way: "Your core is the elephant in the room," and it really is, right? And the problems of that core, well, what are they? Well, I guess we all know how static and inflexible some of these back-end core systems are. Some of them are running on mainframe with legacy code, and some of them, are packages that you can't do much customization easily with, or you end up doing too much customization rather than, using maybe an open environment to build them. But quite often, they are static and they're not flexible. They don't have necessarily APIs. They're not open enough so that you can make change fast. And data in that core is quite often hard to extract. And these days, as we all know, data is the blood of many many digital transformations and businesses, because with the use of AI and machine learning, we could do cool new stuff and great stuff by leveraging that customer data, not only the data that we get from customers in production, but also the data that is hidden, let me say, quote unquote, in these core systems. Now, that static and inflexibility, what it means, it really turns out into what we call growing technical debt. To maintain these systems, customers are still spending 60% of their budgets on maintenance, of just maintaining these systems up and running them, right? And the real big issue, in my opinion, is that when if you have these, a static and inflexible system, and business wants to make a quick and fast change, and that change takes too long, it takes very long, it's because the back-end system quite often is static and inflexible, and therefore the debt that you're paying is exactly the additional amount of time that has to be spent to make the change. You're paying that as an interest, exactly like a financial debt, right? And the interest rate is the hardness, the non-modernization that you have in the back end that is taking you more time to do the same things that you could do if you modernized the system. And what else is holding us back? Well, it's not just, the infrastructure and the software itself and the code, but it's also the way we work. Organizations where, when you look at those, especially when you look at the back ends, there's not a lot of agile going on there, right? Teams are very siloed, and therefore that does impede agile to be adopted and scaled in the organization. There's very little collaboration going on. People, are used to, on those back-end systems, large batch releases, and we all know how more complex it is for IT to deliver on large batch releases rather than on smaller batches. And again, when I do cover Agile and I do a lot of research, and I just about launched actually the 2019 Agile survey on the state of Agile adoption. And one of the big reasons that Agile is stuck is because of large batches, because of the architectures not being flexible enough to organize teams around them. I mean, you mentioned Amazon. Well, Amazon, if you look at their architecture, it looks like a hedgehog with all these little spines, where each spine is basically a web service, right? Now you can start organizing teams around those web services. And then let me say, that clients really are trying to do Agile as if it was a bunch of practices, and not being Agile as if it instead, as it is, which is more about value. It's a state of being, it's a way of being, it's a cultural change, it's values and principles, basically. And then I like to pick on this one too, because this is a growing problem, is that so-called bimodal drama, which also, Kim mentioned. What have we been doing with digital transformation? Mostly we've been focusing on the front end. We've been building great systems of engagement, as we call them, and that's where we've been learning how to use Agile. Now, this is, not necessarily a bad thing, I would say, because I would like to look at the glass half full, because hopefully, you know, what we've learned here can be eventually also brought back into doing what else we need to do, which we'll come to in a minute. But anyway, we've been working in Agile on the front end, and many organizations and CIO are like finding it comfortable to say, well, you know, this is the back end. I know that works, well, kind of works. It's been there for quite some time, but it's complex, and I don't want to touch it. And so I'm happy to keep going with waterfall on the back end, on those back end systems, on the core, on the systems of record, right? And so you've got this bimodal drama now, where in an organization you've got those cool, motivated guys that are trying to get things done quickly and fast and cool on the front end, but you've got this other part of the organization, which is like you're kind of telling them, you know what, you're working on the old stuff, keep doing what you're doing. There's no real innovation that needs to happen there. And that creates, of course, besides a drama internally, because of people think how motivated people are going to be, the ones that are not in those shiny floors and that are down in maybe you know, in the first floor or even underground working in you know, on old technology with old ways, and that we know don't really work well with organizations. So I guess, you know, this is a typical example of what happens.
Yeah. So I'll just illustrate, I think, some of Diego's points with a story here. And again, just, you know, thinking through what you're saying, Diego, this is exactly what I see, right? Someone in the organization will say, okay, look, we just built an iOS application in a month, and it does these 4 things. But then when you actually try to look at what it would take to apply that, to actually bring it to your customers, it's a whole different story, because that front end part, of course, it was easy, but actually serving the right data to your customers, making it a core part of your business, it's a whole different thing. And taking this bimodal approach can absolutely lead you astray to thinking that this just innovating some on the front end and the green fields and the system of engagement is going to take you on the right path in terms of transforming as an organization. So here's just a quick story, and this is a story that Nationwide Insurance presented at DevOps Enterprise Summit in Vegas. And what we did with them, they're pretty key customers of Tasktop. We integrated all their systems in terms of looking at their end-to-end value stream. And we looked at, okay, in terms of actually bringing a feature, not some prototype, but a feature in a business application to market, what's the end of the end flow time, and where is that time spent, right? How much of it's spent in design, how much of it's spent in development, and so on. So not measuring what it took from user story open to close in Jira, but measuring end-to-end flow. So really the customer's perspective and the business perspective. And this is still shocking to me when I say it, even though, you know, I thought I knew it even before we got the true numbers across their product value streams. This was a few years ago, and it's improved considerably since we actually started looking at what the problem was, and to what some of Diego just alluded to. The time spent in Agile in development was 2.5%, right? So the end-to-end time from the customer's perspective of getting that feature to market that was spent on a developer working in Jira and Git and their SCM system was 2.5% of the time. So there's something very strange here. If we're so focused on the Agile part of the digital transformation, but there's only 2.5% is actually spent on that part of Agile. And then so, of course, organizations start thinking, well, you know, we keep getting more developers, we keep getting more tools, we keep being, I think you used the perfect words there, Diego, we keep being more agile, we keep training more people on Scrum, and so on. We keep rolling out scaled Agile frameworks and such. So why is delivery slowing? Why is it not accelerating? And everyone's just scratching their head as to what's going on. And so, Diego, if you go to the next slide, I think this perfectly illustrates. I still have not created a slide that does it as well as John Smart's here from a year ago at DevOps Enterprise Summit in London, where he actually illustrated Barclays' value stream. And this, to the point of silos and Agile being stuck, I think this perfectly illustrates it. If you actually have the siloed thinking, you could be thinking you're going very fast, and whether it's creating a new system of engagement or it's actually your development teams are moving more quickly. If you're only optimizing 2.5% of your value stream, you're not getting anything faster. And what's worse is you're not actually finding the right bottlenecks, because in this world, in this organization, where is the bottleneck? It could well be upstream. Not enough resources are spent on user experience design. There's actually not enough when you're actually scaling these applications. But chances are, and I've seen this more often than not, there's a complete lack of investment in the architecture. Those developers will often be waiting on back-end APIs or on someone to provision a new database with the right kind of customer table and so on. And again, by not seeing the end-to-end picture, by not taking a look at the end-to-end value stream, you're not seeing any of this. And Diego, I want to speak to actually another story right here, your point on data. So often, again, if we look at the way that organizations treat data, and I just spent some time with a leader in machine learning and then applying machine learning and analytics to data sets within enterprise IT organizations. Oftentimes, again, if we're looking at just a localized view of data, the kind of data that you need to create a novel experience for your customers across your different products. If you're an insurance company, right, if you've got 10 different product lines and it's 10 different user experiences because you've got 10 different data sets you're working off of, that's not a great experience in terms of end-to-end. Of course, you need to bring that data together, you need to correlate it, you need to look at it from the customer's point of view, not from the way that your legacy portfolio has been structured. Data and access to this data actually, and what this person was talking about and bringing to the organizations, it's a software problem, right? Creating that data pipeline and not having developers wait on 18 new database changes and wait 6 months for those. That's what's blocking many of these organizations. Again, treating data as core, treating data as a set of APIs that you need to access, and insulating from those database tables is exactly what the tech giants and the innovators are doing, right? They realize that's core. They actually look at their product value streams. They realize multiple of the customer-facing product value streams depend on data they can't easily get, and so they can't innovate. They can't provide a consistent customer experience. And I think this silo, again, back to the point of this siloed thinking, using these legacy architectures as your core with these high levels of technical debt is what's leading organizations astray. It's what's slowing down these value streams beyond these proof of concepts and greenfields projects that Bimodal IT can take us down. So the question that I always ask is, how do we get the organization, how do we get your company to the point where you start to understand at the business level why you need to invest in your core and why your core product value streams are actually as important, and it'll turn out, you'll know this, even more important than your customer-facing product value streams.
Yes, to support the entire customer journey, exactly. So just because we do talk a lot about Agile and DevOps, but I'd like to make a couple of points that we see here in Forrester, which is, by the way, although development is one piece of the process, but it's really, when we think of development and delivery, we're thinking of the broad end-to-end. And what we see is that it's the improvement, despite Agile, despite DevOps, going on Agile for 15 years, DevOps the last 5 years, it's still not improving much. 20% of from our developer survey of about 3,000 developers, worldwide, would say and claim that they can release software once a month, applications once a month. And 9% release applications once a month or sooner. And in that 9%, there's only 1% that can deliver daily or continuously, right? And so this is just the reality. But what's worse is that this has been going on now for the last 5 years, right? The release and the speed by which we develop has not improved, right? Now, that's just talking about speed, and of course, what really counts is not just the speed, it's also, you can improve things, but if you're delivering the wrong stuff that doesn't have the right value for business, I guess, that also, that doesn't help much. So these things have to go hand in hand. The change has to go hand in hand, but speed becomes crucial because everybody does really look at speed these days, and business wants things fast. So speed is definitely one piece of the picture. So the question is, how can we fix this, right? And there's more problems. We're really, cutting short here because we don't have time to talk about all the challenges, but these are probably, some of the core and the big challenges that we have in the room. So how can we fix things? Well, I guess it's quite obvious to say, remove that core elephant from the room. And, I showed this a minute ago saying, we do have the Bimodal Drama. Well, organizations, leading organizations, what are starting to do is they are removing some of that, eliminating the bimodal drama. And how are they doing that? Well, they are really deconstructing the back end in an agile way itself, deconstructing it and replacing it with components. It was interesting at the London, I ran a panel, and there was Riverside, the digital transformation leader of Riverside. I was telling them that, we had two options. It's a retail company. We had two options to modernize our backend system. We realized our backend ERP was not supporting our true digital transformation, and so we started deconstructing it and building it from scratch, custom developed. Basically, I asked, well, why didn't you just replace it? The answer was it would take longer. It would take longer because it would take longer to replace it with something packaged, because they wanted to focus on some of the areas that were higher priority, which they could do if they did deconstruct it and work on the specific components. So eliminating, that means basically now working, of course, to have this happen, this also liberates and makes you work also and bring those modern techniques that we've learned on the front end, on the agile, that being fast and nimble and focus on small batches, you can start bringing those practices also all the way into the backend system. And so teams stop organizing, as we're seeing today, that people have organized like mobile teams that are only focusing on mobile, instead having these more, these teams that can go into backend up to whatever the common component might have to be and work in a true agile way, not just on the front end. And so basically, one of the things to make this happen, of course, and I'm just going to touch on the point, is moving to the cloud. We do see a big movement to the cloud. Companies are starting to do it. Even banks that have been, one of the slowest to make that transition. We're seeing financial services also move to the cloud, and we see them moving to the cloud with different strategies, different approaches, right? The so-called lift and shift, or lift and extend, or rewrite as a deconstruct and rewrite. There's different approaches to moving to the cloud. But what I would like to focus on, what that moving to the cloud really enables, besides all the other advantages that cloud brings, is that we can now start really decoupling and decomposing these applications with containers, with APIs, with microservices, and also now with serverless type of architectures, where we can start deconstructing these applications without necessarily having to design or redesign the entire components, and wrapping them into these containers so that they can start bringing and allowing and enable some of the flexibility that teams need. And you can see that actually organizations that really start microservicing their architectures, this data shows that those organizations that have started to break their deconstructing the backend into microservices architectures, with following architecture design, strong architecture design principles, are the ones that are growing faster, right? So we correlated the data to look at the ones that had microservices currently in use, and that were actually moving into a microservice architecture, were the ones in this survey of 3,000 developers that actually had also higher business growth in the marketplace. And so so it's actually, you will see later that the correlation between the architecture approach and the way we organize teams and the way we structure work is very, very important. Sorry, I guess I'm giving the numbers a little bit late here, but you can see that the 31%, have revenue growth of 50% or more, higher than the ones that don't.
And so I think this is, to a lot of us, this seems obvious, right? Is that investing in microservices, investing in architecture, it yields better business results, right? You see examples of it with plenty of people talking at plenty of conferences on stage about how much this has done for them. So the question I just kept asking myself is because some of us are preaching to the choir here, is why is this so difficult for a decision, an investment decision for enterprise IT organizations to make? Is it, as Diego, you just mentioned, we've had Agile we've had Agile for over a decade. We've had DevOps for a little while now as well. Why is it that these things aren't improving? And I actually completely buy into this premise that if you don't invest in your core, if you don't invest in your architecture, you actually won't improve. It doesn't matter how many to deploy per day if you haven't made those investments of interviewing people for project to product, and of analyzing. What we did is analyze 308 of our customers' value streams as what is impeding their flow, and so realizing that I think a big part of what's led people astray and so on, they're not enough in terms of guiding these investment decisions that will actually have the business side, the technology leadership, invest in the core. And so really, I started asking myself, how do we do this? How do we come up with a new framework that will actually allow you to, or allow your organization to invest in your core value streams, to invest in these microservice architectures? Diego made this really good point about tech debt. How do we have the business side? How do we have leadership understand that there is tech debt? And how do we make a business decision? Because in the end, some of these decisions will make or break businesses, right? In terms of whether you move incrementally and use something like a strangler pattern to fix a backend, an issue you've got because you're a bank and you're building on mainframe. Anyway, do you actually move off mainframe quickly? Do you use a strangler pattern? Do you have web services around it? What do you do? How do we make those decisions? Because some companies at a business level have been very good at making those decisions. Amazon made an over $1 billion replatform decision at some point in its life. Other tech companies like LinkedIn or Twitter have made multiple replatform decisions. How do we move beyond Agile and DevOps and to actually understand what's impeding flow and value streams? Again, more often than not, now that Project to Product has been out there, I'm actually seeing that what's impeding flow in those customer-facing value stream is exactly what Diego's saying. It's a lack of investment in core, is too much technical debt, which then is the main impediment to flow. So my entire goal here with the flow framework has been is to give the business, and Diego, if you go back just that one slide, is to give the business a new framework for understanding that. So it's as simple as, in the flow framework, basically measuring the flow of business value through your value stream. So you measure flow velocity, you measure flow time, how long things take end to end, not how long things take in Jira and Azure DevOps, how long things take to deliver end to end, and you look for what those bottlenecks are. And again, to restate that point, you will notice that more often than not for enterprise IT organizations, the bottlenecks come and the low flow efficiency, the slow flow time, the lower flow velocity of net new features actually comes from a lack of investment in core. It comes from the fact that for this particular product value stream, you have to go to 10 different teams to ask for a new set of data so that you can actually deliver this new digital experience. And this will lead you to a decision of actually saying, okay, here we need to extract a new product value stream that will provide the API, provide the data services to that particular value stream, with the goal, of course, of making these things run as quickly as possible in terms of how much value they deliver to the customer.
So really what I think, Mik, the way we abstract that concept is that you basically have to manage software delivery as a business capability. In Forrester, we are writing more research around this that I would like to share. So basically, the point is that digital matters to everyone, right? Everyone is trying to be more digital. It's trying to accelerate digital transformation. We know that it's software that is powering that digital, right? We know that it's the core, technology and practices around software is what's empowering digital and making digital transformations more successful. And we know that this equation of, if you really want excellent business, you have to have excellence in software delivery. You have to be excellent all the way from the ideation to the design, to the development, to the testing, to the deployment, and to and through the entire customer journey, right? And all the touch points with the customers from the front end, but also into the back end, have this approach of managing all that complexity. And it requires, of course, it does require, core competencies. It requires strong competencies. It requires talents. And so what we've been seeing is that this is becoming a topic. Software has to be something that CEOs of any organization need to care about. They need to care about the software capabilities that they have, the way they're capable of delivering software and services and products, right? And just to give you a few examples, the CEO of Polska Bank, one of the largest banks in Poland, defined themselves as a software company with the license for banking. What does this mean, right? That the CEO is now, CEO and executives, I would say, need to get involved in this to enable, because a lot of the issues with investments, explaining the investments, getting the investments, to make the innovation, because this requires huge change, sometimes the investments are not getting there fast enough. And so what it means really that the CEO has to share the business goals and priorities very clear, but the AD&D leaders, the guys that are in charge, the VP of engineering, those that are in charge of implementing some of the, of development and delivery capabilities, have to be able to link to those business goals. They have to be able to connect what they're doing in the software teams, right? All those layers that Mik showed. We have to give transparency so that CEOs can see what's going on as well. And it also means that organizations have to learn quite a bit of new technologies and new practices that we're talking about. Well, I hear quite often customers saying, this is cool, we're doing Agile, but guess what? I've got my daily job as well. I can't get that. I need time to learn this new stuff. When can I get this learning done? Well, there are organizations like Fidelity, like the Fidelity Personal Investments Division, that give to their employees 1 day a week to actually do special projects and learn. But what it also means that the app dev leaders and the app dev organization, the teams that are delivering, have to commit to they still have to get the daily job done. They still have to commit and deliver. I guess that's putting your face right very clearly in front of this and saying, well, we're not going to hide. We're going to do both the learning. We're going to transform, but we're still going to commit to what we need to deliver. CEOs are the ones that can liberate, of course, cross-silo work, because they can help enable the reorganization of teams that can work in a more of a cross collaboration way. But at the same time, AD&D leaders need to come up with more flexible delivery process so that this team organization fluidity can happen. It's the CEOs that can actually enable agile funding models, right? All the way down from the CEO to the CFO level, so that we can be more agile in the way we allocate budgets. But at the same time, AD&D leaders need to commit and agree that we're going to be, we have to have some transparency in place. We're going to be disciplined about it, and so forth. So the point is really that, basically, this is becoming an area of research where we're raising in Forrester, when we talk about delivery and we talk about application delivery and services delivery, this is a topic that we're writing for, and we're talking to CEOs as well, and not just the CIO and the app dev leaders and the app dev teams, right? This is something raising high up to that level. And you can see basically that, organizations, of course, not everybody is going at the same speed. We do realize that in the market, you've got the intermediates, the advanced, and the beginners. And you can see that there is a progression, right? Some of them start just with digital touch points, touching some of the digital touch points of the customer experience. Some of them go deeper, expanding and trying to scale some of those experiences across more of the organization. But the real advanced guys are the ones that are trying to continuously deliver back end and front end, that continuous delivery that we talked about. And so advanced capabilities, do require also and make continuous delivery more pervasive. And I've got also some how it becomes more important to focus on new sets of metrics. I mean, there are also flow metrics that Mik talked about, but I am seeing with as organizations start to be more agile, and not just, sometimes we put agile and DevOps like on two different planes, but they're really at the same level, and they're really two sides of the same coin, and they both do require and are changing a little bit the mindset of people to focus on new types of metrics that are more value driven, right? That are more connected to customer satisfaction and business value. These are just some data points that come from the Agile survey. You can see that quality is always high up. So it's not just speed, it's what I call quality with speed, or speed with quality. And that's a whole story we could talk about for continuous testing and how testing needs to change, which is another big problem of many of these digital transformations, I believe, and in making continuous delivery work. And then it's really about business value metrics, features, user stories successfully tested and completed. And those business value metrics in terms of sales increase, client retention, percentage. You could now think of trying to have a view of these type of metrics into your entire big organizations, end to end, from ideation to deployment.
So just building on that, I think this is, I think those learnings from the Agile survey there are absolutely key, right? We're seeing metrics. In order to succeed in your digital transformation, you have to take a customer-centric point of view. Again, I think the surface level of doing that is just investing in systems of engagement, forgetting the systems of record. We've addressed that. But ultimately, the way you're going to measure your success in that is through the delivery of business results. And so the flow framework really has just these two goals in order to just help you do what Diego said. Measure flow metrics. So basically, not how many story points you're completing. Those are great. Frameworks like SAFe and others are really good in terms of prioritizing your work. But you actually need to see how efficient work is flowing through your value streams, and even more importantly, what business results that's delivering. So what are your customer net promoter scores? How much revenue has been delivered? How much pipeline conversion has been delivered? How many active users do you have, and so on, rather than focusing on the very easy metrics like user stories closed or open defect or defect escape rate and so on. So really, the key thing has been, as I think Diego mentioned, where you want to end up is continuous delivery across the organization. And really with the flow framework and the underpinnings of it, the goal is to give you a way of actually measuring your product value streams and how close, basically where you are on that journey. And again, I think we've had these years of Agile, that chart that Diego showed is just mind-blowing, how little has improved for this very large cohort of organizations. So I'll just give an example of one flow metric, flow velocity. The goal is not that you're measuring, again, user stories completed or architectural enablers completed and so on, but from the customer's perspective, how much value did you deliver them? Or do you have so much technical debt that your feature velocity is down so low, your debt investment is so high, you actually need to re-platform in order to get that value metric up? Or that perhaps you're not using a framework like SAFe for prioritization and for properly planning things, and that features you're delivering are not delivering the business results that you're expecting because something is wrong with the way that you've approached product management. So the whole point here is to take some of these principles that Diego's talking about and actually allow you to measure how your product value streams are doing in order to determine whether you're doing the right things, whether you need to fix some things, and fundamentally, again, in order to make sure that your investment across your product value streams is allocated the right way, because I am betting right now you're underinvesting in your core and your architecture. So flow time is another example. Again, and flow efficiency will show these things very quickly. If you measure not the silo, but end to end, you'll see exactly where you're falling down for your customers, where your teams don't have the backend services they need, they don't have the APIs, you've underinvested in your data pipeline to get you the right kind of analytics and customer insights, and so on, to offer modern services.
And so I think the third and one of the last most important things that we need to do is really organize around products, or move from projects to products. And we're seeing that happening is something I think that the brick and mortar organizations, this is probably more clearer to software companies, to software product companies, but it's less of something that is known how to do in the software world for IT organizations. There's a lot that we can talk about here, but one thing that I really like to stress through some research that I recently did on the Spotify approach, but it really applies to any type of agile scaling discussion that we're having. And I kind of touched on this when we were talking about why the architecture needs to be decomposed, is because really we have to get, in order to be able to have fluid teams, autonomous teams, not to, not tightly coupled, but actually as decoupled as possible, so that they can exchange, collaborate, but keep going in an autonomous way. You really have to have, work structures that are small batches. For the business, it means minimum viable product ideas. The product architecture itself has to be APIs, microservices, so that the teams can be small enough and agile enough to move fast. So basically, the common thing really for these three entities is small. I say small is beautiful, right? Trying to make the point here, small is really much more efficient for us to collaborate, to have more dynamic teams moving fast in the organization. And of course, I think most of you probably know by now what DevOps is all about, but I would like to stress the fact that the cool thing about DevOps is, the principles, besides the principles and the mindset that is similar to what we've been saying in the Agile world, is that you have to look at DevOps as a way to automate your governance, right? A lot of you have compliance issues. A lot of you have, security and other types of constraints, right, where you want to have checkpoints, where you want to have, control gates. Well, DevOps does not prohibit from having that. The big difference is that it helps you automate it, so it can actually be done better and faster, right? Example is automation, those big never-ending release meetings that we do to approve a release into production. And there's these huge discussions about the quality of the releases. We go through all these checkpoints, where all those checkpoints can be automated in this overall orchestrating delivery pipeline. And I think that will really help, that really helps speeding up and really helps focusing, delivering faster speed, which means delivering value faster to the end users. Value stream management, basically, Mik has touched on this, and we wrote this research last year, and we keep writing other new research, but we do think that VSM at the end of the day, or value stream management, is actually, this additional view that we have to have when we start scaling Agile in the enterprise. And so I really like the way, this is a visual map, actually, of how you can look at that flow, starting from business customer request, going through the different steps to how business gets delivered. And if you look at a flow like this, and you can do this Gemba walk in your organization, not looking at what's written in the books and the manuals that say how your process works, but go and find out what really people are doing. And the surprising thing is, if you apply this methodology, you'll find out that basically, things are taking much longer than what they should, and they uncover the problems, they uncover the waste. So basically, this is saying at the end of the Gemba walk here, going through that this delivery process in a value stream for a specific product, you might find out that the lead time for releasing that feature, it could be the example of the 120 days feature that Mik was talking about. It took 123 days end to end from the ideation to deployment. But really, the process time, the real work to get that done, was only 39 days. What's happening the rest of the delta between 123 and 39? This is really eye-opening for a lot of executives. When they see this, it kind of helps move the needle. And in terms of product development and product-centric, we also see that organizations that are moving into the direction of being more product-centric, they tend to apply many of the practices that we've been talking about, right? Design thinking, a big topic. You can see that teams that are trying to move to products, 46% of them apply that type of technique. 61% will be using Agile. 48% will be using DevOps. 33% will be using value stream management. So, product-centric basically lends itself to apply in a systematic way lots of those different practices and changes that we have to make to in an organization.
And Diego, let's go through these slides quite quickly, but basically the goal here is products and value streams can basically give a shared perspective to the business and the IT side. The challenge, by the way, just in terms of deploying this is you will have all the stuff scattered across your tool chain today. You'll have your Agile tool, your portfolio tool, your product tool, your quality, service desk, and so on. The goal is to basically layer on a product model on top of that. So stop over-focus on the tool chain, think what Diego just said with value stream management, and create this product model. So our approach with the flow framework is you basically integrate this end-to-end value stream and layer on the product model on top of that. And Diego, if you go to the next slide, the way that we approach that is a flow framework as a driver for it, the project-to-product book. I think it's the reason it's become a bestseller is because it just gives people the reason why and a bit of the how and how to do this. And then of course at Tasktop we have our commercial offerings to make this easy for you to do, to basically create this layer of abstraction, create this integration and product modeling organization, so you can start measuring flow and making these value stream decisions based on data rather than based on anecdotes and actually that may lead you astray. And again, back to one of the key things I think we're trying to get across, to help your business make those investment decisions, to go back, to invest into your core, because in the end, that's what's going to make you a digital innovator. Whereas again, focusing on the surface is not. So I guess,
sorry,
go ahead.
Did you want to say?
Oh, and of course, we can help you with that. There was a quick call out there in terms of, we can provide services, and there's a 1 hour free consulting session if you want to learn more on this. And Diego, I'll just let you wrap up now.
I'll wrap it up very quickly, and basically we have a few more minutes for a couple of questions, but basically, a few takeaways: adopt product-centric thinking to really accelerate innovation, empower product managers to really have this business focus, on your application development and delivery capabilities and customer alignment, and use value stream management to do that, and collaborate with your executives on this, and draw alignment between, basically you have to align your business goals, your CEO business goals, with the accelerated innovation and with everything that you're doing as application development leaders. There is a chance to align those things, and if when that happens, magic starts happening, of course. And so I thank you for that, but maybe do we have a few questions? I'll push this back to
Laurel, any questions?
Yes, we do have some questions. If we don't get to yours, because we did get quite a few, we will be following up. First question we have is, how do you articulate the business benefits to support investments from lines of business?
And Diego, I'll take a really quick cut at this, but again, if you actually look at what's slowing down your product value streams, the one that business cares about, you'll see it's an underinvestment in core and APIs and data pipelines. There's a justification. You look at how, again, tech giants do this, they overinvest in that because they know that's where their bottlenecks are. So it's not actually overinvesting. So by seeing reality, you'll make the right investment decisions.
It's funny because in some cases, some clients have the unfortunate context of having a back end that is, every time business asks for a change and it's taking so long. So business at some point, and executives just learn about there's something going that is, they know that their back end is not working, right? They know it. And so basically in that case, I would say, the business benefit is they're going to pay lower interest rates on any change. They're going to be able to get changes very quickly, right? They're going to be able to do things faster.
Awesome, thank you. And our next question we have is, how do you balance managing the flow while being agile with the need of the business to forecast future delivery dates, which forces waterfall thinking?
Okay, well, I guess, there is some planning that is happening, not just at the team level, right? Companies have ideation and portfolio planning type of processes, and there is a level of prioritization that happens before you're kicking a product off, right? Then within the product, you've got the prioritization within the product. So there are different levels of prioritization. And these go on in parallel, right? While we're building product, it's not that we're stopping and closing our eyes to new innovation that is a bit more longer term. It's just not going to be embedded entirely in the same process. Whatever impacts the product will end up into the product, and the portfolio planning will prioritize that. but what doesn't, will go into maybe a future product or a new release of the product and so forth. So I think it's also having an organized planning that is just not at the team and the product level. I don't know if you wanted to.
I agree. And then I'll add one thing to it quickly. Diego's colleague, Dave West, now at Scrum.org, because I have a role of CEO, and he almost insulted me with this, but he said, Mik, do you realize, this was 3 years ago, do you realize you're trying to force our entire development organization into waterfall thinking, because in 18 months, you want this big release of this wonderful thing, while of course you're speaking Agile to the teams the whole time. So yes, we want to know. There's always the business always has demand. They want to make that big splash on the market. They want things to be as predictable as a construction business, constructing a wonderful new building in a downtown center. The problem is it just doesn't work. So you've got to you've got to take a flow orientation approach. You've got to invest where things are working. You've got to do the kind of planning and product-based portfolio planning that Diego's talking about. But you can have aspirations of waterfall working for you. It just won't. So I think this flow-based delivery and guiding delivery through product results, not baking in all risk up front as you do in waterfall, but actually incrementally validating with real customers or customer segments or internal customers, that's what will get you to innovation. The waterfall thinking is not going away. It just doesn't work.
Right.
Thank you.
And there are going to be some areas of the organization, this is a big transition. There's always going to be, if you remember the picture I was trying to resembling, I'm sorry for the turtles that I eliminated on the back end. There's still going to be some areas where you've got some waterfall going on, right? And I don't know of a company yet that has eliminated completely of the brick and mortar companies that have eliminated completely the waterfall, but that doesn't, it doesn't mean that this can't be done. And in the areas where innovation is needed, you have to think differently. You have to deliver small pieces at a time, and you have to get that feedback from not just from the business, but from your users, because that's the other big issue, right?
Thank you. And again, if we didn't get to your questions, we will follow up. I would like to leave on one last question, and that is, can you give a concise description of how project versus product value stream thinking differ?
I got one that's, go ahead, Diego. Mine is over 200 words, so. I mean, pages.
So I would say, if I had to say one, there's a lot you could say, but I think the difference between going from project to product is that the project manager thinks about just delivering something on time. It doesn't matter what it delivers, but it delivers on time, he will get his bonus, the team gets bonus. You have to have the sales and marketing thinking about the product as well. Is it making money? Is it delivering value to the users? I think, that's the big difference, basically. I mean, at least one of them.
Yeah, and just dovetailing on that, project management is about tracking activities. So you're telling, we want these kinds of features, we want this kind of mobile application, so we'll do these 8 activities. It's not tracking results. So if you've got anything wrong in terms of how you're thinking about delivery, let's say you've underinvested in your core, in your data and your backend systems, you will simply not ever discover that in a project plan. But if you're thinking in terms of business results, you see we don't have the right data to have a great mobile experience across our different properties, across our different offerings. You'll discover that very quickly in product thinking, because you'll see you're delivering less business value, you're not able to deliver those kinds of features. So it's measuring results rather than measuring activities is another key aspect. And the results have to be from the customer's perspective.
Great, thank you. All right, that is all the time we have today. You can find out more information on the move from project to product at projecttoproduct.org or on Tasktop's website. We do want to thank Diego again as our guest speaker from Forrester for joining us today.
It was a pleasure.
And thank you all for joining us. Have a great rest of your day or evening.
Thanks, Diego. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.